All right, so in this chapter, you're going to learn about how qualitative methods are used to illuminate relationships, both at an individual and a collective level. Um, you'll see that some of our great insights into the social processes can result from what appears to be very ordinary activities, such as observing, participating, listening, and talking. You'll also learn that qualitative research is much more than just doing what comes naturally in social situations. Qualitative researchers most keenly observe respondents, sensitively plan their participation, systematically take notes, and strategically question respondents. They must also prepare to spend more time and invest more of their whole selves than they do when they use experiments or surveys. If you have any confidence in the validity of a qualitative study's conclusions, each element of its design must be reviewed as carefully as the elements of an experiment or a survey. Okay, so qualitative methods can be used to enrich experiments and surveys, and there's three distinctive research designs. There's participation observation, intensive interviewing, and focus groups. So qualitative methods, these methods typically involve exploratory research questions, inductive reasoning, and orientation to social context and human subjectivity, and the meanings attached by participants to events and to their lives. Qualitative data are mostly written or spoken words or observations that do not have a direct numerical interpretation. Participant observation is a type of field research in which a researcher develops a sustained and intensive relationship with people while they go about doing their normal day-to-day activities. Intensive interviewing is open-ended. It is a relatively unstructured questioning in which the interviewer seeks in-depth information on the interviewee's feelings, experiences, as well as their perceptions. Focus groups are unstructured group interviews in which the focus group leader actively encourages discussion among participants on the topics of interest. Although these three qualitative designs differ in many respects, they share several features that distinguish them from the experimental and survey research designs. Collection primarily of qualitative rather than quantitative data, um, the exploratory research questions with a commitment to inductive reasoning, a focus on previously unstudied processes and unanticipated phenomena, an orientation to social context, to the interconnections between social phenomena rather than to their discrete features. There is a focus on human subjectivity, on the meanings that participants attach to events and other people give to participants' lives. And then there's a focus on the events leading up to a particular event or outcome instead of just general casual explanations. And there's a reflex research design and sensitivity to the subject role of the researcher, a reflexive research design. So in the origins of qualitative research, anthropologists as well as sociologists laid the foundation for modern qualitative methods. While doing field research in the early decades of the 20th century, they were dissatisfied with the studies of Native people that relied on secondhand accounts and inspection of artifacts. Anthropologists such as Boas and Malinowski went to live in or near the communities that they studied. Boas visited Native American villages in the American Northwest, and then Malinowski lived among the New Guinea natives. Neither truly participated in the ongoing social life of those they studied, but both helped to establish the value of intimate familiarity with the community of interest, and thus laid the basis for modern anthropology. So as stated on the last slide, ethnography is the study of a culture or cultures that some group of people shares, using a participant observation over an extended period of time to study it. The netnography is what we use of ethnographic methods to study online communities. So this is also termed as cyber ethnography and virtual ethnography. So it's similar to a traditional ethnography, but the netographer must keep both the observational and reflective field notes. With the participant observation and like choosing a role, the first concern of all participant observes is to decide what balance to strike between observing and participating and whether to reveal their roles as researchers. So once, they've decided whether or not to reveal their role, they can go on to complete the observation part. Researchers try to see things as they happen without disrupting the participants. The observer thus sees what individuals do when they're being observed. They can do a complete observation, which is a role in participant observation in which the researcher does not participate in group activities and is publicly defined as a researcher. And then the reactive effect, which is the changes that an individual or group behavior has that are due to being observed or otherwise studied. So sometimes we can't control how the participants react to us, observing and sitting there watching. Most field researchers adopt a role that involves some active participation in the settings. We do have ethical dilemmas sometimes. For example, researchers may have to prove themselves to group members by joining in some of their questionable activities, which sometimes causes ethical dilemmas as to, if there's going to be bias in the research, or if the research is skewed because of their participation, or if the, activities are questionable, then, is there a chance of harm or legalities that might go along with something like that? So with covert participation, there's a role in the field research in which the researcher does not reveal his or her identity. So it's, covert is like a spy, has a covert operation to attend to. And so, when we hide our identity or we don't realize our identity, our participants don't realize our identity, then the covert participant has adopted the role of a complete participant, which, like I said on the last slide, kind of um, involves ethical dilemmas in some ways and the possibility of bias entering into the equation. So it's a critical stage when we enter the field. There's some background work that we need. We need to develop trust with at least one informant in the group that's being studied. They have to be sensitive to the impressions that they make. It's important to develop, and maintain these relationships that we build with people that are a part of this study and other participants in the study. Otherwise we, run the risk of skewing the study and starting over and scrapping it and beginning again. It's important to maintain those relationships. Researchers need to be really careful as to how they manage the relationships with other participants. They still need to try and remain objective, so it's difficult if they're forced to get too close or too personal with subjects. That can be a very challenging situation for researchers. They need to be able to make valid observations. So, and this, would be impossible if researchers did not have the trust of the people that they are studying. So it's very critical to the research itself to be able to build and develop that trust among the participants and themselves. So when we do theoretical sampling, this is a method that we recommend for field researchers. This is recommended by Glasser and Strauss. A theoretical sample is drawn in a sequential fashion, which with settings or individuals selected for study as earlier observations or interviews indicate that these settings are or individuals are influential. And then we have the experience sampling method, or we shorten it sometimes to ESM. So this is a technique that we do for drawing a representative sample of everyday activities, thoughts, experiences. Participants here carry a paper and are beeped at random times over several days or weeks. Upon hearing the beep, participants complete a report designed by the researcher. Written field notes are the primary means of recording participant observation data. Field notes are notes that describe what's been observed, heard, or otherwise experienced in a participant observation study. These notes usually are written after analysis of data from the observational session. Jottings is another term we use, which is brief notes that are jotted down quickly during the observation period. And then these will be expanded into more extensive field notes later. They sometimes serve as what we call memory joggers. So for participant observation, the field researchers have become a part of the social situation that they're studying, right? That's how they're able to get in and involved and close up and really get to understand the participants and the inner workings of the group or situation. But they also can't help but be affected sometimes on a personal or emotional level. So managing this personal dimension of field research is sometimes referred to as an art form. And so you have to get creative and create, a way for you to get close while still maintaining a professional distance and not, letting your participation in the group skew the research that's being conducted. Okay, so with intensive interviewing, researchers researchers rely on open-ended questions and seek to hear answers in the respondent's own words. The saturation point is the point at which subject selection is ended in intensive interviewing. When new interviews seem to yield little additional information, then it's ended. It's important to establish and maintain a partnership. Problems associated with the entering field are greatly reduced. Arranging long interviews can be complicated. It's important to ask questions, record answers. Questions generally should be short, non-directive probes. Intense interviewers must plan their main questions around an outline of the interview topic. We want to combine participant observation and intensive interviewing. Many large research projects are aimed at uncovering detailed information about a particular phenomenon. This combines the qualitative research techniques of participant observation and intensive interviewing. So focus groups are groups of individuals that are formed by a researcher and then led in group discussion of a topic. The researcher asks specific questions and guides the discussion. The researcher should conduct several focus groups on the same topic and check for consistency in the findings. I've sat on many focus groups for publishing houses, and so basically like when a new textbook comes out or some new idea or product, something in relationship to psychology and what I teach, they'll get a focus group together and there's maybe like 5 of us in there, and they'll just kind of gauge our interest in the product and what was successful, what we liked about it, what needs to be improved. And so it's just a very detailed, kind of questions, but guided, open-ended ones so that they can get a better idea of what, how to better the product that they're offering. They're usually paid too. You usually get like $250 or somewhere around there to sit in a focus group like that. So voluntary participation, we want to make sure that we're maintaining ethics, right? So we want voluntary participation. This can be a point of contention in participant observation studies sometimes. Covert participation does not always offer a way to ensure that the participation by the subjects is voluntary. So we want to make sure that first and foremost, that we're protecting our clients and our subjects and making sure that they're not being harmed in any way as a result of the participation in this. Every field researcher should carefully consider how to avoid harm to subjects. Direct harm to the reputations or feelings of particular individuals is what researchers must carefully avoid. And then for identity disclosure, how much disclosure about the study is necessary. You want to give enough information so that whatever is required and that you're following any ethical guidelines. But, we want to limit also what we're sharing and try not to to skew the research. So how hard should researchers try to make sure that their research purposes are understood? Researchers need to make every effort to expunge possible identifying material. This will help maintain the confidentiality of the participants. They should alter unimportant aspects of a description when necessary. This will help to prevent identity disclosure. So ultimately, we want to keep our files private and, limit the risk of if something were to become exposed, that exposure is very minimal. It's important to maintain appropriate boundaries, right? This is going to involve lessening the boundary between the researcher and the research subject. We want to build rapport versus faking a friendship. It's important that the researcher try and remember that safety in the field is what's important. So any potential risks to the researcher's safety have been evaluated. The final decision to proceed with the research must be made after weighing the relative benefits and the risks to participants as well. So by the end of this chapter, you should, appreciate the hard work that's required to translate doing what, like we put this in quotes, like doing what comes naturally into the systematic research and be able to recognize strong and weak points in qualitative studies.